let's talk about phase shifts of sine functions. So phase shift is moving the function left or right. So before we talked about period, and that's like stretching or compressing the function. Phase shift is just moving over in one direction. So let's start off with a graph of sine of x. So that graph looks kind of like this. And we're at pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, and so on. If we do something like sine of x plus pi over 2, then the phase shift is pi over 2. Phase shift is just the number that we add inside the function. So the way we graph that is, it's going to look like the graph of sine of x, just shifted a little bit. So originally, when we plug in 0, we get out 0. But now when we plug in 0 for x, we get sine of pi over 2. So this is originally where pi over 2 is. Now, now we're going to be shifting that spot back to 0. So we're going to be starting right here. And it'll go like this. So everything is going to be shifted pi over 2 units back. So now this spot where it crosses the axis, instead of being at pi, it's going to be at pi over 2. Pi over 2. Then this will be pi. This will be 3 pi over 2. And so on. Likewise, if we did, say, like sine of x minus, say x minus 3 pi over 2. Let's draw the graph of that. So originally, at 3 pi over 2, this is negative pi over 2. This is negative pi. This is negative 3 pi over 2. Originally, when we plug in 0, we're here. But now, when we plug in 0, we're at negative 3 pi over 2. So we take this negative 3 pi over 2 and then shift this all the way here. So now we're starting again here and repeating. Wow, so this actually comes out to the same exact graph as before. So let's do one more. Let's do scratch out that 2 there. Let's do sine of x minus pi over 4. So originally at pi over 4, we are at negative pi over 4, we're here. Now we got to shift this a little bit. So now that pi over 4 spot is going to be on the y-axis. So we're starting right about here. So it's going to be like this. So everything now gets shifted this way by pi over 4 units. So this pi over 2 that used to be pi over 2, that is now 3 pi over 4. This pi is now 5 pi over 4, and so on. So so one thing you may have noticed is that this looks exactly like a cosine graph, right? And yeah, it is. Sine is just a phase shift of cosine, or cosine is just a phase shift of sine. You can think about it either way. They're just shifted horizontally a little bit. Let's try something with tangent. So tangent, let's try tangent of x plus x plus pi. Yeah, something straightforward like that. So tangent, draw what it is normally. actually. Let's make it x plus pi over 2. So this is originally pi over 2, 3 pi over 2, negative pi over 2, negative 3 pi over 2, and then we've got our tangent slopes in here. Alright, so if we want to that's not the graph we want to draw. That's just the graph of tangent x. If we want to graph this thing, then we have to ask, well, what's happening when we plug in 0 for x? So initially, we plug in 0 for x, and we're right here. But now here, when we plug in 0 for x, we are at pi over 2. So we're taking this asymptote, and then we're shifting it over all the way here. So now we've got an asymptote here. And then other asymptotes as they used to be. So asymptotes are spaced pi apart, so this is negative pi, and this is pi. So now the graph looks like this. So that is how you deal with phase shifts and functions. You just ask what's going to happen when you plug in 0, and then you just shift it accordingly.